He arrived at the place where a bridge was meant to be rebuilt, between him and those he once called family. But no one came to greet him. No footsteps, no laughter, only the wind echoing through the empty lodge like the sound of betrayal. He had paid $12,000 for a weekend that was supposed to heal. But instead, it became his awakening. Behind the silent walls of an Oregon cabin, a transformation began. From a man mocked and betrayed to someone who would never be played again. When the phone rang and his wife's voice was followed by his daughter's laughter, that unmistakable sound he could recognize anywhere, something inside him broke. And then it hardened. No more silence, no more compromise. Everything would change. Because betrayal isn't the end. It's the trigger. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. The tires of James Barlow's Audi crunched against the gravel as he navigated the final bend toward Alder Creek Lodge. The structure emerged in front of him, a sprawling timber estate nestled beneath Oregon's vast mountain skyline. It looked like something from a travel brochure. Rustic charm blended with quiet sophistication, almost too quiet. James turned off the engine, pausing as he stared through the windshield. At 44, his face bore the clean lines of classic good looks, though a certain tiredness now edged his eyes, an erosion of time and trust. He reached for the thermos in the center console, took a sip of strong, still-hot coffee, then stepped into the brisk breath of autumn. His charcoal gray suit hugged his frame with bespoke precision, unwrinkled and exact. Order had always been his anchor. Carrying a sleek overnight bag in one hand and the thermos in the other, he moved toward the front of the lodge. It was exactly 4:25 p.m., his trademark punctuality. But the gravel lot was vacant. No signs of approaching vehicles, no sounds of welcome, no laughter, just stillness. "Hello?" he called out as he pushed through the weight of the solid front door. His voice ricocheted through the cavernous great room. At the far end, an enormous stone hearth sat untouched, the firebox gray with old ash. The long dining table he'd specially requested for the weekend retreat stood uncovered. No linens, no settings, no centerpiece. He set down his bag at the threshold and began a slow, deliberate walk through the empty lodge. The kitchen was immaculate, as though never used. Each of the 8 bedrooms was tidily prepared, but not a single one bore the trace of occupancy. Pulling out his phone, he checked for messages. Nothing. Not a single missed call or text. Back in the main room, he turned toward the cold fireplace and simply stood there. Part of him had suspected this outcome, but facing it head-on struck harder than he'd anticipated. $12,000. A meticulously planned weekend to reconnect the fractured pieces of his life. Lauren's family, her sister Isla and her husband, their children. Most of all, Jenna, his daughter, his family. And yet here he stood, alone. He pressed Lauren's contact and dialed, each tap a quiet act of restraint. It rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice light and breezy. "Hey, you. Where are you now?" Laughter trailed behind her voice, light, unmistakable. Jenna. He knew that laugh anywhere. "I'm at Alder Creek," he said, voice measured. A beat passed. Then Lauren laughed, a short, amused burst, as if he'd just revealed a ridiculous secret. "Oh my God, James, you actually went?" He could hear Jenna now, laughing in tandem, her voice coming closer. "Wait, Dad, are you serious? You really drove all the way out there? We were just messing around. We went yesterday. It was so fun." "Yeah," Lauren added sweetly, her tone laced with that saccharine falseness he'd grown used to. "We figured you'd know we weren't serious. You're always so swamped. We never thought you'd actually take time off." His hand tightened around the phone, knuckles pale. His eyes were fixed ahead, though they saw nothing, just a blur beyond the wall. Jenna made the most amazing pasta salad, Lauren continued with faux enthusiasm. She's such a little chef now. We'll save you some, promise. They both laughed again. James ended the call without a word. The phone slipped back into his pocket. He didn't move. The only sound was the wind outside and the creak of the tall pines beyond the windows. Sunlight stretched long over the wooden floor, gold shadows crawling toward him, up the walls. That night, James built a fire. The caretaker had left a generous stack of seasoned logs. He arranged them with methodical care, every angle calculated for maximum burn, just as his father had shown him long before liquor had taken that man away. When the flames caught, they danced in quiet rhythm across his face. He lowered himself into a leather armchair and traded his coffee for whiskey. Neat. He rarely drank. But tonight made an exception. 10 years. 10 years of unease festering like mold in the dark corners of his marriage. 10 years of small lies from Lauren, each one excusable on its own, but together forming a devastating pattern. 10 years of watching Jenna slip further out of reach, pulled by something unseen, but always present. He closed his eyes, and the past crept in. Jenna, just 14, perched at the kitchen island. Lauren and Isla moved about the stove. James had stood silently down the hall, just out of view. "Your dad's not exactly warm," Isla had said, thinking he wasn't listening. "Some men just aren't built that way." "I know," Lauren had replied, voice dipped in mock sympathy. "It's not really his fault. He's just emotionally underdeveloped." Jenna had nodded, saying nothing, but she'd heard. Another memory. Her 16th birthday. He'd rearranged his entire workday to surprise her. Bought her first car, modest, reliable, safe. She'd smiled, said thank you with practiced grace. Later, he'd overheard Lauren whisper, "Your dad thinks money can solve everything. Just thank him and let it go." It was just easier that way. The fire popped in the fireplace, pulling James out of his quiet spiral. He brought the glass of whiskey to his lips, taking a deliberate sip, feeling the burn settle in his chest. His mind drifted to those nights when she came back later than she should have. The business trips, with timelines that never quite held together. He remembered the unfamiliar names lighting up her phone screen and the way her explanations dissolved when pressed. After he'd borrowed her laptop, his battery had died, she suddenly decided to change all her passwords. Still, he hadn't pressed further. He told himself it was for Jenna's sake, for the appearance of peace, for the image of a family he convinced himself they still were. But genuine families don't leave you stranded at the retreat you paid for. Real families don't mock you in your absence, and they certainly don't turn your own daughter against you. He finished the last of his drink and set the glass down softly on the side table. The fire was now little more than glowing embers, painting the room in muted red tones. He checked his watch, 1:17 a.m. In a few hours, he'd place the call to Henry. His brother had never been fooled by Lauren's charm. "There's venom in that one," Henry had once said. James had brushed it off, blindly defending her. That would be his last time making that mistake. This wasn't the end. This was just the first move. James pulled into his driveway late Sunday evening. The colonial-style house he'd purchased 7 years earlier sat beneath the porch lights, glowing amber and welcoming. There was a time that warm light meant something. Now it felt theatrical, too polished, like a backdrop in a stage play. He remained in the driver's seat a moment, letting the stillness arrange his thoughts. The long drive from Oregon had given him time to reflect, to strategize, to steady himself. When he finally shut off the engine and stepped toward the house, his face was unreadable. Inside, Lauren stood at the kitchen island, slicing vegetables. She looked up when he entered, her smile polite, her eyes alert. "There you are," she said, setting the knife down. "I was starting to worry." He dropped his keys beside her. "Were you, though?" "Of course." she replied lightly. She still had it, that effortless beauty at 39, golden hair, the figure that turned heads. But now, all he saw was calculation behind her gaze. "Jenna's upstairs," she said, "working on an assignment. She'll be down soon for dinner." He gave a quiet nod. "I'm going to shower." Without another word, he climbed the stairs, not acknowledging the faint look of confusion that crossed her face. In the bedroom, he headed straight to the closet, pushing aside heavy coats to reveal a compact fireproof safe. The combination was Jenna's birthday. He opened it and pulled out a neat stack of papers, placing them carefully into his briefcase. In the bathroom, he unscrewed the vent cover from the ceiling. Behind it was a waterproof pouch containing the original deed to the house. Only his name on it. He'd hidden it long ago, when the first seeds of doubt took root. That too went into the briefcase. Downstairs he could hear Lauren clattering cookware, humming some cheerful tune, as if the world hadn't shifted beneath her feet. But it had, and he wasn't pretending anymore. The next morning, once Lauren had gone to her Pilates class and Jenna had left for school, James sat at his desk in the home office and began moving money. Not all of it. He wasn't careless, but enough to start separating his life from hers. He transferred the funds to a new bank, one with no links to Lauren, no breadcrumbs. When he was done, he leaned back, letting his eyes rest on a photo on the bookshelf. A beach trip 3 summers ago. They were all grinning, but the truth had been buried under every one of those smiles. Over the following days, James maintained the routine. He went to work, came home in time for dinner, asked Jenna about her classes. Yet each day, something quietly vanished from the house. Family heirlooms from his side, important documents, the external hard drive with their full tax history. Lauren began to notice. He saw it in the way she lingered outside the office, pretending to search for things. By the 3rd week, she confronted him. Jenna was out with friends. It was just the two of them in the kitchen. "What's happening, James?" she asked, arms crossed tightly over her chest. He didn't lift his eyes from the email on his screen. "What are you talking about? You're different, and things are missing." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. Once, that small gesture might have broken through his guard. Now it felt foreign, an act from someone he didn't know anymore. "If this is about the lodge..." "It was just a joke," she said in a gentle voice. "You're being really sensitive lately." Finally, he met her gaze. "A joke that cost $12,000. Hilarious." Her face flickered for a moment, an unguarded look, hard and sharp, before she smoothed it over with something softer, more performative. "We can go back, all 3 of us. Start over." "That won't be necessary," James said, standing. "I've got a meeting." And he did. With Henry. The VA hospital smelled like antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. James walked through the sterile corridors with familiarity, past the nurse's station, until he reached the physical therapy area. Henry was there, scowling at a young therapist trying to manipulate his leg. "I told you it doesn't bend that way anymore," Henry snapped. His voice was gravelly, worn from pain and pride. At 47, Henry carried every mile of his military service on his face. 3 years earlier, an IED had torn his leg apart. Now it was held together by pins, steel rods, and fading hope. "And I'm telling you," the therapist replied, calm and steady. "If you want to stay out of that wheelchair, you've got to keep it moving." "Trust your therapist, Hole," James called out from the doorway, a faint smirk on his lips. "She actually knows what she's doing." Henry glanced up sharply, annoyance flickering across his face before it softened into a crooked grin at the sight of his younger brother. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he muttered dryly. Taking advantage of the distraction, the therapist gave his leg another push, prompting an explosive string of curses that earned a weary sigh from her. "That's a wrap for today," she said, inputting notes into her tablet. "Stick with the stretches I showed you, Sergeant. Same time Thursday." As she walked out, Henry gestured toward the chair beside his table. "You look like you've been through a war zone." James lowered himself into the seat, running a hand through his dark hair, now laced with silver at the sides. "You've always had a way with compliments," he replied, leaning in. "What's going on? Your message sounded urgent." "It's about Lauren," James said quietly. Henry snorted. "She's always been more poison than person. I told you that before you walked down the aisle." "And you told me to get lost when I didn't take your advice," James added. "Yeah, I remember, so what's changed?" James laid everything bare: the deserted lodge, the cruel joke, the growing unease, and the slow decay of their marriage. Henry listened without interrupting, his face hardening with each detail. When James finally fell silent, the room felt still. "You want the truth?" Henry asked. "I do." "Cut her loose, quick and clean. Don't look back." James nodded slowly. That was the answer he expected and needed to hear. "There's more," he added. "I've been digging around. I think she's been unfaithful. Probably more than once." Henry swore under his breath. "You got solid proof?" "Some. Not enough to make it airtight." "Then make it airtight." Henry leaned forward, voice firm. "And when you do, call Tamara Vance." James raised an eyebrow. "The attorney? How do you know her?" A dark grin tugged at Henry's lips. "She took care of my split from Karen. That woman's a shark in designer heels. Exactly what you need." Later that afternoon, James sat across from Tamara Vance in her sleek downtown office. Her sharp cheekbones and stylish silver bob gave her a commanding presence. Her gaze was focused and intelligent. "Sergeant Barlow speaks highly of you," she said, flipping through the files James had provided. "Not the type to hand out praise easily." "Henry reads people well," James said, except when it came to his first wife. A slight quirk tugged at the corners of Tamara's mouth. "We've all got our blind spots, Mr. Barlow." "Even someone like you?" he asked, half smiling. She set the documents aside and met his eyes directly. "My professional opinion? You've made a good start. But we need more. Messages confirming the affairs, financial records showing any misuse of shared funds, and we need to talk about your daughter. Jenna's almost 18, nearly done with high school. But the damage your wife caused there could complicate things, especially with custody." James's gut clenched at the mention of Jenna. "There's something else," he said, retrieving a folder from his briefcase and sliding it across the desk. Tamara opened it, her brows arching as she scanned the contents. "A DNA test? She's not biologically mine." "How long have you known?" 3 years. I found medical records when Jenna needed surgery. Our blood types didn't line up. I got the test done privately." Tamara's gaze didn't waver. "But you stayed." He nodded. "She's still my daughter. I raised her." Her tone stayed measured, though there was a hint of respect behind it. "This alters the legal landscape, for both custody and finances. I'm not planning to use it unless it becomes absolutely necessary," James said. She nodded and jotted down a quick note. "Let's get the rest of the documentation. I'll have my investigator begin immediately." As James stood to leave, Tamara offered one last thought. "Mr. Barlow, can I offer a bit of advice?" He paused in the doorway. "Don't let her see it coming. The element of surprise is everything in a situation like this." James gave a small nod, the memory of the deserted lodge and the sound of distant laughter sharp in his mind. "I know exactly how effective surprise can be, Ms. Vance." The investigation moved fast. Tamara's team was sharp, discreet, and unrelenting. Within 2 weeks, they'd compiled a comprehensive file on Lauren's behavior and contacts. Now, James sat across from Tamara once more, reviewing the evidence. Chains of compromising messages, credit card charges for motel stays, and photos of Lauren slipping in and out of an unfamiliar apartment building on the other side of town. "His name is Brandon Caldwell," Tamara said, pointing to an image of a man in his mid-30s, messy hair, leather jacket, and a careless grin. He calls himself Brandon, plays music, barely. James stared at the photo, committing every detail of the man's face to memory. There was something unsettlingly familiar about the man in the photo. We believe the relationship has been going on for at least 8 months, Tamara stated evenly, her tone composed yet unwavering. Though it may have started even earlier. James thumbed through the photographs she had handed him, stopping abruptly at one image. It showed Lauren at an outdoor cafe, seated beside Brandon and a woman he didn't immediately recognize. "Who's this?" he asked, tapping the woman's face with a growing sense of dread. Tamara consulted her notes. "Fiona Caldwell, Brandon's wife." The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Fiona, Jenna's godmother. She and Lauren had been inseparable since their college years. Tamara's face hardened. "That's not all. We've uncovered evidence of a previous affair. This one goes back roughly 2 years. Same woman, different partner." She pushed another photo across the desk toward him. James's gaze dropped to the image, and his stomach twisted. "Tom Reinhardt," he murmured. "He used to coach Jenna's soccer team in middle school." His voice cracked under the weight of disgust. "Is there anyone Lauren hasn't slept with?" Tamara stayed silent. Instead, she turned another page in the folder she carried. "There's also the financial aspect we need to cover." James leaned back in his chair, his jaw locked tight. "She's been gradually siphoning funds from your shared accounts into a private one, under her maiden name. The transfers were small, spaced out, but over time, they've added up. She's moved over 50 grand in the past 3 years. James nodded slowly. Deep down, he'd suspected something like this. "And Jenna?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Has she been pulled into this mess?" Tamara paused. "There's no conclusive evidence," she said carefully. "But we did recover a series of texts between your wife and her sister, Isla. They've clearly been working together to turn Jenna against you." She passed him a set of printed messages. James skimmed the pages, his expression darkening with every word. Lauren. "James is throwing a fit about Jenna's curfew again. Still acts like she's in grade school." Isla. "Same old controlling nonsense, especially when it comes to the money." Lauren. "Told Jenna not to let it bother her. Said it's just how he shows love, by trying to control everything." He placed the papers down slowly, his hands trembling as cold fury surged through him. "There's something else," Tamara said, her voice low. "There's a dinner planned for Friday, at Isla's place. According to the texts, Lauren's planning to make some sort of announcement." "What kind of announcement?" "They don't say outright," Tamara replied. "But from the context, it looks like she's preparing to announce a divorce, on her terms, in front of the family." James let out a long, measured breath. Every muscle in his body was coiled with tension. Then he looked up, eyes clear. "Have everything ready by Friday, the legal paperwork, and inform the sheriff's department. We're serving her that night." Tamara gave a crisp nod. "We'll be ready." Later that evening, driving home, James's thoughts churned. He couldn't stop thinking about Jenna, about how Lauren had carefully manipulated her, not by lying directly, but by distorting the truth, by casting his concern as control and his boundaries as oppression. His thoughts turned to Fiona Caldwell, loyal and trusting, completely unaware that her husband had betrayed her with her closest friend. And then, inevitably, he thought about Friday. The carefully planned dinner, Lauren's stage-managed moment of power, her version of the story. But not this time. Friday arrived, crisp and clear. James got dressed with purpose, a navy blue suit, a precisely knotted tie, shoes buffed to a shine. His armor. He was adjusting his tie when a soft knock came at the door. "Dad?" Jenna called from the hallway. "Mom says we need to leave in 10. He turned toward her. At 18, she was nearly a mirror of her mother, same honey-colored hair, but those eyes, they had always felt like his. Now he wasn't so sure. "I'll be driving separately," he said. "Need to make a stop first." Jenna frowned. "Mom's not gonna like that." "I'm aware." She hesitated in the doorway, unease settling in her stance. "Is something going on? You've been different lately." He studied her, searching for answers in her gaze. How much had she absorbed? How much had she been told? What he saw was not anger, only confusion, and perhaps a glimmer of concern. "You'll understand everything soon," he said softly. Jenna gave a tentative nod. "All right, see you there." 30 minutes later, James pulled up outside Isla's home. The lawn was neatly trimmed, warm light glowing from the windows. Cars filled the driveway, among them Lauren's silver Lexus. An unmarked vehicle waited nearby. Tamara was behind the wheel. "Still sure about this?" she asked as he approached. "Without question," James said. She stepped out just as a sheriff's cruiser rolled in behind her. The deputy inside had already been briefed. Inside the house, the dinner party was in full swing. Laughter echoed from the dining room as James stepped through the front door unannounced, Tamara and the deputy flanking him. The room fell into an instant hush. 8 pairs of eyes swung toward him, faces quickly shifting from surprise to uncertainty to dread. Lauren sat at the end of the table, her complexion draining of color as she took in the scene. "James," she said sharply, "what is this? Who are these people?" James's eyes moved methodically from face to face around the dinner table. Isla sat close to her husband, while Lauren's parents exchanged polite small talk with Jenna. But what truly snagged his attention was the unlikely presence of Brandon and Fiona Caldwell. That was a surprise. Lauren had taken the reckless liberty of inviting both her clandestine lover and the man's unsuspecting wife to the same gathering where she intended to drop the news of her divorce. Brazen didn't even begin to describe it. "This is Tamara Vance, my attorney," James announced with a calm, level voice. "And this is Deputy Marsh." The deputy stepped forward, a folder in hand. "Lauren Barlow?" Lauren slowly got to her feet, her eyes never leaving James's. "Yes?" "You've been officially served," the deputy said, offering the envelope. When she didn't move to take it, he placed it gently on the table in front of her. "What is this?" Isla snapped, springing to her feet beside her sister. "James, what the hell are you doing?" "He's filing for divorce," Tamara responded evenly. "Citing infidelity, concealment of marital assets, and deliberate emotional abandonment." A suffocating hush fell over the room as everyone absorbed the words. James's eyes found Fiona, who sat frozen, staring at the envelope. "Fiona," he said softly, "I wish I could have told you another way, but Brandon and Lauren have been involved for nearly 8 months." Fiona's head jerked up, eyes flicking from James to her husband, then to Lauren. "Excuse me?" Brandon's face went pale. No, that's not true. Lauren, say something. This is insane." Lauren said nothing. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, eyes locked on James with a seething intensity. "There's proof," James added, speaking directly to Fiona. "Photos, messages, hotel receipts. Tamara has them all on record." Fiona turned on Brandon, her expression twisted with fury and heartbreak. "You son of a bitch!" Jenna leapt to her feet, her chair clattering behind her. "Dad, stop! What are you doing?" James turned to her now, voice steady as ever. "I'm telling the truth, Jenna. Something your mother stopped doing a long time ago." "You're lying," she insisted, though her voice trembled. She looked at her mother. "Tell me he's lying." Lauren blinked hard as if coming out of a fog. "Of course he is, honey. He's angry and—" "Angry because you've been quietly bleeding our bank accounts?" James cut in. "Because you've been sneaking around with your best friend's husband? Or maybe because you and Isla have spent years feeding Jenna lies about me? Isla stormed toward him, face flushed with fury. How dare you come into my house and vomit this filth? Nothing I've said is fabricated, Tamara interjected, cool and sharp. It's all verified in the documents just delivered to Mrs. Barlow. The room erupted. Brandon stammered denials as Fiona yelled over him. Lauren's parents clutched each other, stunned and silent. Isla tried pulling Jenna toward the hallway, but James stepped into their path. She's not going anywhere, he said firmly. She doesn't need to be exposed to this, Isla snapped back. She's an adult. She deserves to hear the truth. Jenna looked at all of them, tear-streaked and trembling. I just want to leave. You're free to go with your mother, James said, gentler now. But you should know, she won't be living at the house anymore. The deed's in my name alone. Lauren flinched as though she'd been slapped. That's not true, she whispered. It is, James confirmed. Just like I know about Tom Reinhardt and the missing money. There's more, if you want to keep going. The room froze. Lauren's expression began to crack, her practiced composure slipping away under the weight of it all. We'll be in touch, Tamara said into the silence. Mrs. Barlow, I suggest retaining legal representation immediately. James gave the table one final glance. His eyes lingered on Jenna, devastated and broken. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Tamara followed closely behind. Outside, the air was brisk, the night sharp against the heat still radiating from his chest. That played out exactly how we structured it, Tamara said. James gave a slight nod, though a hollow feeling had begun to settle in his core. So what now? Now, we wait. Her options are running out fast. Just then, the front door burst open. Fiona charged out, eyes red, face flushed with hurt and anger. She spotted James by his car and headed straight for him. How long have you known? She demanded. For about a month, James answered truthfully. I wanted to tell you right away, but Tamara thought it was best to wait until everything was airtight. Fiona crossed her arms, visibly shaking, not just from the cold. Thank you for not leaving me in the dark. She looked back at the house, jaw clenched. 20 years of friendship, and this is what it comes to. James didn't say anything. There was nothing he could say. After a long pause, Fiona brushed the tears from her cheeks and stood taller. First thing tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Can you forward me everything you've uncovered on Brandon and Lauren? James asked flatly. My attorney will be in contact. Fiona gave a curt nod, spun around, and walked briskly to her car, leaving Brandon standing there in silence, abandoned to find his own way home. The days that followed unraveled in a blur. Legal motions flew back and forth, tempers flared, and the repercussions rippled across every facet of their lives. Lauren tried to make a purchase, only to find all her credit cards declined, every account frozen solid. She exploded over the phone, unleashing a storm of curses and threats. James listened in silence before hanging up without a word. She had temporarily moved in with Isla, dragging Jenna along for the ride. A few days later, Brandon Caldwell scrubbed his entire online presence, leaving behind a vague, hollow apology that only intensified the backlash. That same week, Fiona filed for divorce, 3 days after that fateful dinner. Her petition mirrored James's down to the documented evidence. Midweek, James's phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Is this James Barlow? Came a quiet voice when he answered. Speaking. Who is this? It's Isla. Her tone was strained, hesitant. I think we should talk. They arranged to meet at a downtown cafe, a neutral setting. Isla showed up looking worn down, her typically sleek exterior frayed and faded. So why am I here? James asked once they sat with their drinks in a secluded corner. Isla stared into her cup before speaking. I had no idea about the affairs, she said softly. Or the money. I didn't know, I swear. James studied her carefully, reading her face for signs of insincerity. But you helped her turn Jenna against me. She flinched. I did, she admitted after a beat. Lauren told me stories, said you were rigid, emotionally distant, that you controlled the money and made her feel insignificant. And you believed her? I did, Isla said, finally looking up. It was easier to take her word for it than question my own sister. But now, she hesitated, then continued, living with her, hearing the way she talks about you, Fiona, everyone. It's like we're only useful if we serve her agenda. Her eyes fell again. She's been lying to me for a long time, about more than just you, about everything, probably. What are you hoping to get from me, Isla? Nothing. I just needed to say I'm sorry, for the part I played. James gave a slight nod, but remained silent. Forgiveness wasn't something he could offer. Not yet. How's Jenna doing? He asked after a pause. A softness returned to Isla's expression. She's hurt, angry. A lot of that is directed at Lauren, but some of it's aimed at you too, for how you exposed it all. I won't apologize for the truth, James said plainly. I didn't expect you to, she replied. After a moment, she added, she's been asking about you, wondering if you're okay. A flicker passed through James's eyes, his chest tightening. Tell her I'm all right. Later that day, while sorting documents in his office, a new message popped up on his phone. The number was unknown. It's Jenna. Mom doesn't know I'm texting. Can we talk? A surge of emotion hit him like a wave. He typed back, Of course. When? Tomorrow after school. Can I come by the house? I'll be there. The following afternoon, James left work early and paced the kitchen, too unsettled to sit. At 3:45, the front door eased open. He turned toward it, bracing himself. Jenna stepped inside, looking far younger than her age. Baggy clothes, tired eyes, the trace of tears still visible. Hey, she said quietly. Hey, want something to eat? I can fix something, he offered gently. She shook her head. No, I'm good. Her eyes scanned the room. Feels strange being here without her. James nodded, unsure how to answer. Aunt Isla told me you two talked, Jenna said. She said she apologized. She did. Jenna hesitated. Are you? Sorry, I mean, for airing it all out like that? James thought for a moment before answering. No, I'm not sorry for telling the truth, but I do regret that you had to see it that way. She picked at a thread on her sleeve, eyes downcast. Mom's a mess. She's either sobbing or screaming, then back to sobbing. That's not your responsibility to carry, Jenna. I know, she said, her voice catching. But she's still my mom, and you broke her. James's voice was calm, unwavering. No, she broke herself. Every decision that brought us here was hers. Did you love her? The question came suddenly, catching him off guard. He nodded slowly. Yes, deeply. Once. Jenna seemed to absorb that. Then, in a move so familiar it ached, she opened the refrigerator door and peeked inside, as if muscle memory had taken over. So what happens now? With everything? The divorce and all? James looked at her. That depends on your mother. If she pushes back, this could stretch on for months. But if she agrees to the terms my attorney presented, we could bring it to a close relatively quickly. Jenna's voice broke the silence, barely audible. And what about me? A familiar hollow ache swelled in James's chest, an ache tied to a girl he'd raised as his own, even as she'd been turned against him, a girl who still meant more to him than she'd ever know. You're 18 now, he said gently. That means you have the freedom to choose where you want to live and who you let into your life. He hesitated, his throat tightening. I just, I hope you'll still choose to let me be part of yours." His voice faltered, revealing more emotion than he intended. Jenna closed the refrigerator and leaned against it, her gaze fixed on him. "Did Mom really sleep with Uncle Brandon?" she asked, her words clipped and trembling. James gave a slow, deliberate nod. "She did. And she stole money too?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long time, her brows drawn together. "She told me you were controlling, that you monitored every cent she spent, that you treated her like a child." "That's not true," James said, his tone calm, measured. "But I understand why you'd believe her. She's persuasive when she wants to be." Jenna didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, it was a soft confession. "I don't know what's real anymore, not about you, not about her." "That's okay," he said gently. "It's a lot to take in." She straightened, pushing off the fridge. "I should go. Mom thinks I'm still at the library." James walked her to the front door, resisting the overwhelming urge to reach out and hug her. At the doorway, she hesitated. "Dad?" He turned to her. "Yeah? Would you be okay if we talked again sometime? Like this?" A quiet breath escaped him, the tension in his chest easing. "Any time, Jenna. My door's always open." She gave a tiny nod and slipped outside. The door clicked softly shut behind her. 3 weeks later, James sat beside his attorney, Tamara, inside a courthouse conference room. They waited in silence for Lauren and her legal counsel to arrive for their first mediation session. The early court rulings had leaned in James's favor. A judge had ordered Lauren to vacate the family home and had imposed temporary financial restrictions based on compelling evidence of her prior misconduct with shared accounts. "She's late," James said, checking his watch. "She's trying to send a message," Tamara replied coolly. "Her lawyer warned her against playing games like this." I'm sure he did, but Lauren never did take advice easily. Just then, the door creaked open. Lauren walked in, her attorney, an older man burdened by a bloated briefcase, close behind. Lauren was dressed to perfection, elegant attire, flawless makeup, hair styled like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But behind the polished image, James spotted the telltale signs of strain. "Apologies," her lawyer said briskly, setting down the heavy case with a thud. "Traffic was impossible." Tamara offered a nod that revealed nothing. "Shall we begin?" What followed was an hour of tense, back-and-forth sparring. Lauren's lawyer pushed hard for favorable terms, but Tamara dismantled each proposal with precision, citing clear documentation of Lauren's past behavior. "My client is still willing to be fair despite your client's actions," Tamara said evenly, "but that willingness has its limits." "This is vindictive," Lauren snapped, ignoring the subtle shake of her lawyer's head. "You're trying to destroy me after almost 20 years together." 16 years, James corrected quietly. "We were married for 16. Lauren waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever. The point is, I helped build everything. I deserve a share and spousal support. And let's not forget Jenna. She still needs me." "Jenna is legally an adult," Tamara replied evenly. "There is no longer a basis for child support." "She's still in high school," Lauren's lawyer interjected, "and she'll need support through college. Mr. Barlow has always expressed a willingness to pay for her education." Tamara glanced at James, who gave a subtle, affirming nod. "My client is open to addressing Jenna's educational expenses," she said. "But the situation is complicated." "What complications?" the lawyer asked, his brows drawing together. Tamara opened a folder, pulled out a document, and slid it across the table. "This." The attorney picked up the paper and began reading, adjusting his glasses. His expression shifted gradually, from curiosity to shock. Is this legitimate?" It is, Tamara replied, confirmed by an accredited lab. Lauren leaned forward, trying to get a glimpse. What is that? What did you just show him? Her lawyer handed her the paper. James watched as her eyes scanned the page. Her face drained of color. A paternity test, she murmured, barely above a whisper. Her eyes met his. You tested her? 3 years ago, James said, voice even. After she had her appendix out. Her blood type didn't match mine. Lauren's head shook slowly, denial creeping in. No, that can't be. The test must be wrong. It's not, he said quietly. And you know that. Her attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Barlow, if you were aware that Mr. Barlow wasn't the biological father and led him to believe otherwise, that could potentially constitute fraud. I had no idea, Lauren said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and urgency. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't know. James didn't answer. He remained still, unmoved, watching as the illusion she had so carefully maintained began to crumble before his eyes. Her words rang hollow. He saw right through them, reflecting on everything, the conveniently timed pregnancy, her insistence on marrying quickly. It all clicked into place now. This significantly changes our legal posture, Tamara stated, her voice composed as she addressed Lauren's counsel. Though my client raised Jenna with unwavering love and continues to support her education voluntarily, he holds no legal duty to do so. With the confirmation of paternity deception, along with documented infidelity and financial misconduct, there is no foundation for a spousal support claim. The mediation disintegrated almost immediately. Lauren's attorney requested time to consult privately. 2 days later, the parties met again in court to determine temporary financial arrangements. James sat beside Tamara, quiet and composed, while the judge reviewed the files, particularly the DNA test results that shattered any remaining doubt. In light of the presented evidence, the judge said, casting a sharp look over her glasses at Lauren, the request for temporary spousal support is denied. This court has reviewed multiple instances of dishonest behavior and financial wrongdoing. While the length of the marriage is acknowledged, the petitioner's actions have severely undermined the integrity of the union. Lauren choked back a sob, her composure unraveling. Regarding property ownership, the judge continued, turning to another section of the file, the deed clearly indicates that the house belongs solely to Mr. Barlow. Mrs. Barlow has no legal claim to the residence. She is required to vacate and remove any personal items within 7 days, with supervision from a court-appointed officer. Subsequent rulings covered financial matters, joint accounts, shared credit, all of which were resolved in James's favor. When the hearing ended, Lauren was openly crying, her lawyer silent beside her, face set in resignation. Outside the courtroom, just before Tamara reached the exit, James stopped her. What happens now? He asked in a low voice. Her attorney will likely advise her to settle, Tamara replied, calm and pragmatic. She has very little leverage left. If she's rational, she'll take the offer and walk away. James gave a slow nod, a mixture of vindication and hollowness tightening in his chest. And if she's not rational? Tamara met his gaze. Then we continue. But James, winning this decisively doesn't always feel like victory. That thought stayed with him as he drove back. The house, once brimming with life and echoes of the past, now sat heavy with silence. He had pursued truth, demanded justice, and earned his freedom. But the triumph felt strangely empty. His phone vibrated with a message from Jenna. Heard about the hearing, about the test. Why didn't you tell me? He stared at the screen for a long time before typing, I didn't want to hurt you. You've always been my daughter. That doesn't change because of a test. There was no reply. 6 months later, James stood on the deck of his new home in the mountains, a timber frame retreat perched near the edge of a vast national forest. The early sun spilled across the peaks, painting them gold. Coffee's on, Henry called from the kitchen. James took one last look at the sunrise before heading inside. The new place was smaller, built for simplicity and purpose. It was all on one floor, with extra-wide hallways and thoughtful design to accommodate Henry's wheelchair whenever needed. Every window framed the breathtaking views. 3 months earlier, Henry had moved in after James sold the old colonial. The decision made sense. Companionship for James, support for Henry during his tougher days. "Mail came early," Henry said, sliding an envelope across the counter as James filled a mug. "It's from the foundation." James tore it open, scanned the contents, and a real smile spread across his face, the first in what felt like forever. "They approved it. Full funding for year 1. "No way," Henry laughed, raising his coffee in celebration. "To the Barlow Veterans Mentorship Program." They clinked mugs. The idea had been born during a midnight conversation about redemption, connecting veterans struggling to adjust with experienced mentors who could guide them forward. James had the network. Thanks to the divorce settlement and the sale of his house, he now had the resources too. "We should mark the occasion," Henry said with a grin. "Host something here." "Like who?" James asked, taking a sip. "Fiona and her boys. They've been good to us." James nodded. Fiona Caldwell had been a quiet but steadfast presence through the chaos. Her twin sons, both 13 and inquisitive, adored Henry, mesmerized by his war stories, undeterred by the scars. "I'll call her," James said. Later that day, as he wrapped up the final grant documents in his office, his phone rang. Fiona. "Got your message," she said warmly. "Congratulations on the grant. That's incredible." "Thanks. We're putting together a little gathering tomorrow night if you and the boys are free." "We'd love that," she said. "They've been asking when they can hang out with Henry again." "He's teaching them poker." "Not very well," James joked. Fiona laughed, the sound light and sincere. "Still better than what their father taught them." The laughter faded into a thoughtful silence. Then her voice softened. "Any word from Jenna?" James's smile faltered, not in exact terms. Isla had mentioned she'd been accepted into 3 universities for the fall. That, at least, was something to be hopeful about. Still, the silence lingered. "She'll come around, James," Fiona said gently. "She's still sorting through it all, trying to understand who she is now that everything's out in the open." "I want to believe that," James replied, though doubt gnawed at him. Since the paternity test had shattered the illusion, the distance between him and Jenna had only grown. Her replies were few and far between, and their planned meetups were often postponed or canceled entirely. Fiona, sensing his unease, shifted gears. "Anyway, we'll see you in the morning, 6 o'clock sharp." "Looking forward to it." The next night, the house buzzed with far more energy than James had anticipated. Fiona arrived with her boys as expected, but so did several of the veterans from the mentorship program, a few of James's work associates who had supported the effort, and, unexpectedly, the judge who had signed off on the nonprofit's charter. She was a veteran, too. As James moved through the crowd, offering introductions and refilling glasses, he found himself surprised by how comfortable he felt in their presence. On the back deck, Henry held a captive audience, sharing stories that swung between heartbreaking and hilarious for the younger vets. "You've built something meaningful," Fiona said, stepping beside him as he looked out over the gathering. "We're just getting started," he said. "Still," she said, studying him, "it matters. And you seem steadier, different." He considered that for a moment. "For the first time in ages, I actually feel like myself again." Fiona smiled, warm and knowing. "That's what healing does." Later that evening, as the guests began to drift away, James slipped outside to the quiet of the deck. The night was cool with the faint hint of spring, Stars blinked above a darkening sky. His phone vibrated in his pocket, an unfamiliar number, but one he'd never truly forgotten. Heard about the Veterans Program. That's amazing. Congrats. Jenna. James stared at the screen, heart thudding, fingers momentarily frozen. Then he typed back. Thank you. It really means a lot, hearing from you. The typing bubbles appeared, then vanished, then returned. I'm still figuring everything out, but I wanted to say I think what you're doing is really good. Whenever you're ready to talk, James wrote, I'll be here. I know. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A small fracture in the wall between them. For now, that was enough. Summer hit hard, ushering in sweltering heat and more bad news about Lauren's unraveling. She lost her job at the real estate office, Isla told James one afternoon during one of their now regular coffee meetups. Their relationship had settled into a quiet truce, with Isla occasionally serving as the only thread connecting James to Jenna. What happened this time? He asked, swirling the ice in his drink. Isla sighed. The usual. She pissed off the wrong person, this time the broker's wife. James arched an eyebrow but said nothing. He could read the subtext. She's still staying with you? He asked instead. Not anymore, thank God. She found a tiny place on the east side. Isla paused, then added quietly, She's not doing great, James. That's not really my concern these days. I get it. I'm not saying it should be just... She trailed off, shaking her head. It's hard watching someone fall apart when you once cared. James knew that ache all too well. Benji posted another apology, Isla said, changing the subject. Even more pathetic than the last. James had seen it. Another rambling social media post in which Benji Caldwell cataloged his many shortcomings and declared he was on a path to redemption. It was full of overused self-help quotes and vague references to therapy. The comment section was brutal, James said. Fiona told me he's holed up in his parents' basement now, planning a redemption-themed podcast. Isla rolled her eyes. Naturally, Lauren can't stand him now. Says he betrayed her. Sounds about right. They sipped in silence for a moment. She's leaving for Berkeley in 3 weeks, Isla said finally. James nodded. He knew. He was covering the tuition, arranged through the school per Jenna's request to keep his role discreet. She might want to hear from you before she leaves, Isla said, her voice cautious. I've sent texts, James replied. She answers sometimes, but it's distant, guarded. Try writing her, Isla suggested. An actual letter, something she can touch. She's not as angry as she acts, Isla added softly. She's lost, trying to figure out where she belongs. James took a deep breath, letting that settle. I'll think about it. That night he sat at his desk, a blank sheet of stationery in front of him. He had already discarded 3 drafts. How do you condense a lifetime of affection, remorse, and yearning into a single page? Eventually, he put pen to paper once more. Dear Jenna, first, congratulations on Berkeley. I'm endlessly proud of you. I know you'll thrive there. I'm writing because there are things you deserve to know before stepping into this next chapter of your life. Things I should have said long ago, but didn't know how. You are my daughter. No test or science could ever alter that truth. From the moment I held you for the first time, my love for you was absolute. It never wavered, not once. I'm sorry for everything that brought us to this place. Not for the truth itself. Truth is essential, even when it stings. But for the pain it caused you. You deserved better. From both me and your mother. I want you to know that my door is always open. My love has never been conditional. As you move forward and shape your future, I hope I can walk a part of that journey with you. But if you need distance, I'll honor that too. The Veterans Program is thriving. Henry is in his element, barking commands like he's still on base, though everyone knows he's a softy under the tough exterior. Fiona and the boys visit often. She wrapped up her divorce from Brandon last month, and honestly, she seems lighter, like she's finally breathing freely again. I think you'd appreciate the woman she's becoming, now that she's no longer tied to someone who dimmed her spark. I hope your time at college brings you everything your soul is seeking: knowledge, connection, adventure, clarity. More than anything, I hope it brings you peace. What we do often speaks louder than what we say. I hope my actions, from this point on, reflect the love I hold for you, not the mistakes behind us. Always your father, James. He reviewed it carefully, folded it with care, and tucked it into an envelope. Whether it would shift anything, he couldn't say, but it was honest, and for now, that was enough. A week later, just as he stepped out of a meeting with prospective donors for the program, his phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. He answered. "Hello? Dad." The voice was unsure, but unmistakable. James froze mid-step, his heart caught in his throat. "Jenna, hi. I got your letter," she said. That's good," he murmured. There was a brief silence. "Did you mean it? What you wrote? About me still being your daughter?" "Every single word," he replied, voice thick with emotion. Another pause, this one longer. "I'm leaving for Berkeley next Tuesday," she finally said. "I was thinking maybe we could meet for coffee before I go, just to talk." James closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of relief washing over him like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I'd love that, truly." "Monday morning?" she asked. "That cafe near the park?" "I'll be there." After the call ended, James stood still on the sidewalk, the warmth of the sun on his face, overcome by something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Exactly a year after that day at the empty lodge, James stood again on the deck of Alder Creek Lodge, watching the gravel lot fill with cars. But this time, the air was anything but still. Henry hobbled out the front entrance, leaning on his cane. "Food's nearly done. Fiona is handling the drinks," he said. James took a sip from the well-worn thermos in his hand and nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Hole." Henry gave him a long, pointed look. "You okay? You've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says your brain won't shut off." James chuckled softly. "Just thinking. Being back here stirs a lot." Henry nodded, understanding. "Feels different now?" It did. The idea for the community cookout had been Henry's. A celebration marking the Veterans Program's first anniversary, a gesture of thanks to supporters, and a way to welcome new mentors and participants. Hosting it at the lodge felt fitting, almost poetic. James had paid the $12,000 rental again, but this time, the money meant something. The place buzzed with life all afternoon. Veterans shared stories with their families. Donors mingled and shook hands. Locals from the mountain town stopped by. Fiona and her boys had become a fixture in James and Henry's lives. James moved among the guests, receiving kind words, exchanging handshakes, feeling a steady, quiet pride take root in his chest. They had served 27 veterans this year, with plans to grow the program into neighboring counties soon. "Mr. Barlow?" A young woman in an Air Force uniform approached. "I just wanted to say thank you. My husband was one of your first mentees. He's working now, really working. Everything's different for us." James offered her a warm, genuine smile. "He did the hard part. We just helped him see the way." "Still, thank you." As evening settled in and twilight deepened, James found himself near the great stone hearth, its fire crackling brightly. In his hand, a rare glass of whiskey. Around him, laughter and conversation swirled. It felt real, grounded. Fiona appeared beside him, glowing in a simple blue dress. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she teased with a smile. James turned to her, voice low. Just reflecting. It's been a hell of a year. She nodded, her expression soft. That it has. She clinked her glass lightly against his. To brighter tomorrows, she said. I'll toast to that, he answered, offering a faint, contented smile. They stood together, shoulders nearly touching, wrapped in a companionable silence as they took in the scene before them. Fiona's twins were mid-card game with Henry, the trio bursting into laughter every few minutes. Have you been in touch with Jenna? Fiona asked after a moment's quiet. I heard from her last week, James replied, a subtle light flickering in his eyes. She's doing great. Made the dean's list. He couldn't quite hide the pride threading through his voice. She's thinking about coming home for part of the summer. That's really good to hear. He gave a small, thoughtful nod. Their last in-person chat over coffee before she'd left for school had been cautious but encouraging. Since then, their communication had been infrequent. Some texts, the odd email, a phone call here and there. Careful, incremental steps toward rebuilding something once fractured. And what about Lauren? Fiona asked, her tone neutral. No clue, he said flatly. Isla mentioned she's out in Arizona. Picked up a new job. Maybe a fresh beginning, Fiona said gently. James gave a dry half smile. I hope it gives her peace, from far away. Fiona let out a quiet laugh. That's probably wise. Just then, a young veteran approached with questions about the mentoring initiative. Fiona gave James a soft smile and stepped aside to let them speak privately. As James engaged in the conversation, an old memory surfaced. Last year's aborted family reunion, never brought to life. This gathering felt different. Sincere. Built on truth, not appearances. Later that night, as the evening wound down, Henry found him sitting near the fire pit. A few guests still lingered, toasting marshmallows, swapping stories under the stars. Henry eased into the chair beside him. Any regrets? He asked, his voice low. James glanced over at his brother, then swept his gaze across the lodge, at the people who had become a kind of family, at the purpose that had grown out of the wreckage. No, he said at last, raising his coffee cup. Just wish I'd had the sense to leave sooner. Henry gave a slow nod, the answer settling heavily between them. When the final guests had gone, James remained outside, watching stars pierce the dark over the mountain peaks. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Jenna. Just wanted to say I hope the barbecue was a hit. Been thinking of you all. James smiled and typed back. It was just right. The lodge was full, with the people who mattered. Happy to hear that. Let's talk summer soon, anytime. You know where to find me. I do. Good night, Dad. Good night, Jenna. He slid the phone back into his pocket and breathed in the crisp mountain air. Behind him, the lodge glowed with soft light, the distant sounds of Henry and Fiona cleaning up floating out, punctuated by their occasional laughter. It wasn't just the end of an old story, it was the start of something honest, something real, something new. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.